Thank you very much indeed, Bishop John. Thank you, Mr. Dean, and thank you all for giving your time to be here this morning. To be able to be part of the celebration of the legacy of Bishop King is a very particular personal privilege for me, having first encountered the memory of Bishop King when I was a teenager, having read his biography when I was a student. I feel that he continues to set a benchmark for all those who seek to serve as teachers and pastors in the Church, and very specially in the Church of England. I've been given and have accepted one of those titles which can happily mean almost anything you want it to mean. And I'm going to cheat very slightly in the way I approach my title. Faith, hope, and charity are generally agreed to be good things, and to get any particular kind of grip on the subject is not easy just because they're generally agreed to be good things. And so I'm going to come at this in a slightly roundabout way by approaching them as they are dealt with by one of the great mystics of Christian history, the 16th century Spanish friar, St. John of the Cross. And I've decided to approach faith, hope, and charity by way of St. John's writing because of one very distinctive insight which he has about them. St. John, like everybody else in his generation of Catholic theologians, takes for granted a picture of the human mind which sees it as working in three basic ways. The human mind understands, it remembers, and it wants. It understands, it remembers, and it wants. Or in more abstract terms, the human mind is made up of the interaction of understanding, memory, and will. And the distinctive and fresh insight that St. John of the Cross offers is that if you put together understanding, memory, and will with faith, hope, and charity, you have a perfect picture of where we start and where we finish. In the Christian life, faith, he says, is what happens to our understanding. Hope is what happens to our remembering. And love is what happens to our wanting. To grow up as a Christian is to take that journey from understanding into faith, from memory into hope, and from will into love. St. John also believed that in that process of Christian growing up, one of the very difficult things that happened was that we lost our bearings on the way. What we thought we understood, we discover that we never did. What we thought we remembered is covered with confusion. And what we thought we wanted turns out to be empty. We have to be recreated in faith and hope and love for our understanding, our memory, and our will to become what God would really want them to be. So I've used that structure as a way of getting into thinking about faith and hope and love. What I'll be looking at is what some of the problems and crises are that in our contemporary culture confront us in respect of our understanding, our remembering, and our wanting, to look at some of the ways in which we try to deny or run away from the way the problem is posed, and to look at how we, as people of faith, recover our direction and enter into the fullness of our humanity. So let's begin with understanding, with intelligence. At the moment, we live in a culture where, where intelligence is not very much prized. That's perhaps a bit of an overstatement, but let me explain. How do we understand things in an environment where it seems any opinion or any conviction is often regarded as being as good as any other? How does intelligence work in a culture where people are constantly asking, what is truth, and is there such a thing? On the one hand, we have very often an approach to intelligence or knowledge which treats it in a very functional way. Most of you familiar with the kind of official document on the purpose of education, which tells us that its primary aim is to make us a more competitive economy. And whatever exactly that's about, I don't really think it's about intelligence. You might like to think about the uses of intelligence in the financial world in the last couple of years, but that's another lecture and a longer one. So, on the one hand, there is a philosophy, what somebody described as an official philosophy of education, which doesn't really seem to prize intelligence in the old sense, which doesn't seem to give much scope for the mind being stretched and challenged and enriched in completely unpredictable ways, and actually in what may be completely unprofitable ways in terms of visible measures of economic production. But at the same time, we have what's usually called the postmodern environment, in which any view may be as good as any other, in which a claim to truth, let alone absolute truth, is regarded by some as offensive or oppressive. We are in a period which St. John of the Cross might well have described in his characteristic language as a dark night for intelligence. We don't quite know what knowing is for. We don't quite know that we can know or what we can know. And it affects our Christian self-understanding as well. We've lost a great deal of our doctrinal certainty, however loudly we may shout about it. We've often lost a sense that we can confidently trace the works of God and confidently relay to the world what God has said. And we deny this sometimes by slipping back into tribal and moralizing and noisy forms of faith, which never quite come to terms with the huge challenge and crisis in the middle of it all. We've lost a lot of our bearings.